All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and I hope everyone is enjoying the first day of OC5. And if you haven't already, tried some of the amazing demos that we have here on the show floor. And I hope that you have taken some interesting sessions and classes, and that you're excited for the last classroom session of today, which is about UX research in VR. The format of today's classroom is going to be a little bit different from the past few. This is a fireside chat, which basically means it's an intimate conversation between our experts here, researchers at Oculus, and you fine folks. Very small and intimate, no big deal.
We aren't going to code anything. So like as a heads up, if you're looking for codes, it's not going to happen.
All right, so my name is Brian Espinosa. I am the hardware researcher at Oculus, and we have here.
I'm Franz. I'm a UX research lead at Oculus.
I'm James Lin. I am a perceptual scientist in Oculus.
All right, and so to start us off, I want to talk about how we all started our passions and interests related to VR, and so, but specifically, professionally. So, what was your journey to get to Oculus?
Yeah, I guess I will start first.
Okay, James first.
As a perceptual scientist in Oculus, I'm basically looking into the opportunities and issues that related to human perception, such as visual, tactile, as well as looking into how do people navigate in the virtual environment. And I have my background in design, both bachelor and master. And during my PhD, I'm looking specifically that in the area of human-computer interaction and human perceptual issues in virtual reality. And basically looking into how do we better enhance user experience in immersive virtual environment that imply a wide field of view. After finishing my PhD year 2004, unfortunately there was no VR industry like today. And then I decided to work for two large companies, their industrial lab, and primarily focus on how do we better facilitate a group of people being able to work together, either co-located or remotely. And this group of people, they will work together, use heterogeneous type of device or display. So we are talking about like a stenographer, radiologist, or plane operator work together with energy trader, or even the pilot in the sky work with dispatchers on the ground. So looking at all of these issues that related to user experience, that related to leverage different type of display, and with, of course, digital information inside, then how do we facilitate their workflow? How do we engage the strengths and weakness of their perceptual capability in those different type of heterogeneous environment? And about a year ago, I'm very lucky and excited about coming back to the whole VR world and AR world. So basically looking again, think about that from the perceptual perspective, and then how do we better leverage the characteristics of human sensory channel, motor interaction, and then trying to leverage their experience, as well as how do we help to create those kind of perceptual superpower for people to enjoy their VR experience.
That's so cool. I know in my graduate program, I know I read some of your articles actually. And
I'm very old.
And I know it took you 15 years to get back into VR, but we are very lucky and happy to have you.
Thank you.
So Tara, what was your journey to Oculus?
Yeah, so I studied sociology in school a ways back in the day. And when I was studying sociology, I got really into like internet culture and understanding how people define identity and sort of a sense of self online. So I had studied things about like how do we build community across distances when there was literally like BBS chat. If you like remember that, we'll high five later. So there's like bulletin board systems, and then it grew to like game spaces and Sims Online, and like how do we create a sense of self? How do we create community online? And then after graduating from York University, Toronto, So after that, I ended up kind of as a qualitative researcher and running research programs for market research, communities, and then agencies, working at a lot of different verticals. So trying to understand actually like how people create great tech experiences in banking or like grocery stores or like an app on your phone. And there was like so many different verticals, e-commerce stuff. And then finally, within this last year, I have found my way back to like the gaming and online identity space by joining Oculus and having a chance to work on Oculus Quest as well as social platform tools. So I feel like I'm sort of like coming home again to be like, ooh, online community, defy distance. It's like 2004 again. So yeah, it's been really fun for me to kind of go through that, refine skills as a UX researcher and how to think about the methods that apply to the state of like tech innovation that you're at. But then also to get into this topic that I'm like super personally passionate about. So that's kind of how I got here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, what about you, Brian?
I'm from Seattle and went to school both for my graduate and undergrad at University of Washington, where I majored in human-centered design and engineering. And like most recent graduates, I meandered through my careers where I was a researcher at large banking and looking at banking user experience, and then to mobile phones, and then to OSs, and finally was able to land a really cool, interesting role at a company that you might be familiar with, Htc Vive. And I was there for 3 years until, a little over a year ago is where I joined Oculus, and I'm very fortunate and lucky to still be working in the space of VR because it is super fascinating. I'm sure everyone here agrees with me. Speaking of our common interest and passion for VR, I wanted to ask our panel here, where your interest in VR kind of originated. So, what was your first aha moments with VR, or what is your current favorite VR content?
Whoa. I'll go first. I'm kind of like a sucker for a good story, as much as I love games. And I've already sort of outed myself as a gamer, so I've been doing it for a long time. And even in picking my master's thesis topic, I thought I was very smart because I got to play video games for 2 years and then like call it a degree. So my parents were cool with that. But now with virtual reality, I actually found the thing that got me really excited and got me interested in working at Oculus was experiences like Henry and Space Invaders, where you get to have a real moment with a character that puts you in a situation where the empathy that you build, and being a researcher, I'm like very into empathy, but the empathy you build by being in that space and part of that story was just like super moving to me, and it gave me that light bulb where I thought this is the thing that we could use to facilitate really positive experiences in a way that could change people and also build that community, like globally or even locally. But yeah, Henry, that porcupine gets me every time. I still like try to be like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. Like when he hugs the turtle. Have you guys seen it? I know it's like a classic, but God, it's so sweet. And then the Space Invaders, the little guy behind you. Sorry, there's all these real moments where you like turn and see things, and you feel like you're the protector of that character. And I know I've like talked to Maureen a lot about how she built that and the intention of the emotion. I just think it's like super brilliant, and those moments really brought me to realize this is an amazing space.
Yeah,
That's
Henry's one of my favorites. How about you?
Well, I have to say, super hard right there. So for those of you who haven't tried it, go for it. Well, we talked a little bit about the so-called perceptual superpower. And for me, when I first time played super hard, and then suddenly realized, wow, this slogan, time move as you move. That to me is almost like we try to cross over that temporal axis together with the spatial axis. And two of them marry together. I mean, who could ever imagine one can make the time stop and move as you move? And then so as I played the game and then got really excited, well, also accidentally start to bump into certain things here and there. And at the same time start to make me think about, well, what's the reason? Well, it's my living room. How come I will bump into the stuff? I know certain things here, and then what's the reason? So as we know, in VR, we talk a lot about the sense of presence, right? And then one of them is about, well, you totally immerse in the virtual world and then forgot about real world. But on the other hand, to some degree, we're still in the real world. So from the perceptual perspective, for me, is to think about, basically, you have one spatial contrast about the real world. Once you get into the VR world, and then that spatial contrast of the real world start to flying away, and then we are in this a new spatial contrast of the VR world. So one of the areas that we are looking at is certainly how can we better enhance the safety of users' experience in VR. So when that start to deviate, and then we can think about a way to realign them, and then so on one hand, we can enhance people's experience. On the other hand, well, they can still enjoy and then have presence without knowing too much, while we embed certain things underneath and then trying to enhance their safety. So.
Yeah. Like, I love that theme of like superpowers, except even though you can be a superpower in VR, you're still immortal in reality. And speaking of which, so one of my favorite experiences in VR relate to superpowers. It is Insomniac's Unspoken. It is such a good game. I just feel like I have all these magical powers and you get to fight. But I'm also a huge fan of Alchemy's suite of apps, from the Rick and Morty to Job Sim. But a lot of those have the same themes that I think both of you have mentioned. Right? They have great storytelling. They enable superpowers that you wish you could do in real life. It's just, a lot of fun. Okay, but these fine folks are here to hopefully gain some insights about UXR, or user research, and how they can maybe learn from there. Or is it just me?
It might be me. I'm like a heavy breather, sorry.
And then how they can potentially implement that into their development cycle. So, question is, Tara, what is a favorite or simple or quick thing that people can do that will be helpful in their product or development cycle?
Yeah, so what I sort of have this like song and dance talk that I've done a few times about how to build UX culture within an organization and how to do it simply or with like really basic tools. So there's a couple things I would mention as part of this. One is that there is an opportunity to be doing user experience testing and research and engagement at the full, at all parts of your development cycle. So whether it's just beginning and exploration, sort of having like really deep conversations with audiences you may not be thinking about in order to understand like where, what are your goals? What do you want to be building? What do you want people to feel? And like, what are the best ways to get there? So getting some like nice qualitative depth on that. And then you can kind of move through the cycle of like, as you start developing, doing usability testing really early and often so that you catch problems before you spend too many engineering hours there. And this is where I actually feel like the simplest, best thing you can do is find people who are just like one arm's length away from you. I know privacy can often be an issue. You don't want to like show early stage of your game. You don't want to show rough stuff all the time, but you could bring in, friends, family, people that are sort of friendly, but also not someone super invested in the development, so that they can have a chance to try what you're building and give really honest feedback that says, hey, I'm like totally experiencing the intended feeling of this. I'm able to get through the steps. I can understand how to play. I'm capable to approach this. Because if you think about making sure people are comfortable, as we talk about, and making sure they can be welcomed in the space, there's all sorts of stuff that comes from hardware building, but goes really into even feeling like you are able and capable to play, to get into the space, to experience something, and are they feeling the feels you want them to, or is there sort of these unintended side states happening, in which place you can pivot your story or pivot the actions or the narrative. So it doesn't take a lot of people, which is why I think it's my favorite. It's qualitative. So that means you have like small sample size and you go really deep in the context. So you can have numbers like once you launch something, you're like, oh, 70% of people are using this, or we have low retention, something people talk about. That's cool to understand the numbers, and you can really identify issues that way. But the qualitative part is where you can go deep and understand like why might that be happening, and you can do it with like 8 to 12 people. So even just within a couple days, it's really inexpensive. There's lots of online resources of how to like talk to people in comfortable ways and ask good questions, just being really open to the feedback. I think doing that early and then doing it through your whole cycle, you just continue to get the right kind of like removed from yourself feedback that you get, so you can build a better experience that works.
So why do you have to go to someone that's not in your team? Why not just like test with each other?
Yeah, I think what we end up seeing is you get sort of a bias that builds from understanding the whole cycle. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, you and I agreed that this was confusing, so we fixed it. And then when you show it to someone else, they're like, I wasn't confused before, but now I am now. You know, different things can happen. So it's nice to have somebody who's outside of the problem space, doesn't have a personal interest in making sure it's good, so they won't necessarily be nice about it, and just be like, feels great, everything you're doing is great. That they'll actually be like, I'm totally lost, or this feels weird, or I'm not actually happy when you wanted me to be happy, or I'm not laughing at the joke that you all think is super funny because you're like in on it, right? So it's nice to get someone just further, and as you get through your development cycle and you're more comfortable, you can get people that are more and more sort of external, and that is a huge benefit.
Oh.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So like, how do you reconcile when users have conflicting perspectives? Like, do you qualify which users you're interviewing, or especially if you're going deep?
Yes, so the question was, how do you reconcile users having different feedback, right?
Even
Contradictory, yeah. So this is amazing, this is terrible. Yeah, great question. When we recruit studies like this, so the people you ask in, it's good to have a set of information, like baseline information that you ask. So you might say, some things that I've seen, for instance, is how much experience do you already have in virtual reality, or how much experience do you have in gaming? And then what kinds of things do you like to do? So hobbies, interests. Maybe you're trying to build something for certain age groups. So you may see really different feedback just simply because of their capability levels. Sometimes it's just simply preference, and then you as like the expert developer need to say, well, we want to live in this bucket. Like we want people to be scared, so like we're comfortable with that, or there's sort of that early discovery phase work too, where at some point you've hopefully decided you're building a certain type of thing for a specific audience, and then you might try to just find people like that and test with that. I always like grab a few people from outside my audience just to be like, what does happen when I bring in these people I'm not really targeting? Are they still having a good time and at least comfortable? And so it's kind of tricky, but it's actually interesting because when you do like 8 to 12 interviews, and you guys could probably speak to this,
yes,
it actually comes to be really clear patterns. So at first you talk to 3 people and you have an anecdote at that point. You're like, well, this person like that, this person felt different, and then you do, by the time you're done 12, you're like, I've heard everything. I've literally heard everything. It's just gonna start repeating, and there's a lot of good science behind this. I swear you can read Nielsen papers on it. It's not just my own personal experience. So you will just come to see the pattern and start to hear the same things over and over. But skill level, age, like demographic can make big differences. So you wanna kind of control for either mixing those or not, depending on your goal.
Yeah.
And so going back, if I can,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think just some small thing to add on. I think on one hand, the difference is associated with demographic data. It's very likely to happen. On the other hand, well, as a perceptual scientist, I like to chop things into the detail. And then, so when they have a response of, yeah, I like it, I hate it, or I enjoy it, I don't enjoy it, it's a very sort of unclear construct to me. So it's a big thing. And then we would like to dive deeper. I mean, what's the reason that you like it? Which part you like it? Do you like it because of the storyline itself? Or do you like it because it's so intense and then I need to move so much? So there are a lot of different small, tiny neons here and there. And then they all contribute to part of the experience. As a whole, people may say they like it, they don't like it, but at the end of the day, what we try to find out is which part should we tune in order to let people like it more, or which part should we tune down. Yeah. So I think that's also another direction to dive deeper.
I think you both answered it. I don't have to add it. But what I would add, okay, let's really quickly. I think we have time. Another way is, aside from having a better understanding of who you're targeting, and as well as having greater fidelity of what you're hoping to measure or understand, another way is to actually segment what you're hoping to study. So for game development, I'm sure there's multiple levels or tasks or goals that you want to understand and research. And so by just segmenting it, you'd actually get better signal from the people that you're asking about. So even if they are conflicting, maybe it is more targeted. Like maybe that one stage is a bit too hard because X, Y, and Z, while someone else thinks it's super easy. But maybe because you know who they are, oh, that person plays 10 hours a day. And so maybe that's why there's a conflict, and at least you have that context. And from there, you can have meaningful and more in-depth understanding of how to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this is a discussion, and thank you for chiming in. Please feel free, just raise your hand, and if I don't see you, just say, hey, I have a question, and then I'll try to call on you. This is an intimate conversation. All right, so aside from just knowing kind of the general simple methodologies, I'm sure a lot of people here would also like to understand, because we are building for a medium that is growing and evolving, and there's so many things that we don't know, to know more about what we do know, or how do we go about studying the most important part of research, which are humans, right? So James, this is your area as a perceptual scientist. What do we know about humans, and how can we design for them?
Certainly, there are already years of research, and then from a lot of different fields that people look into a human from autonomy perspective, from the sensory perspective, from the perceptual perspective. And one of the area, actually we talk about it in OC2 as well as OC4, people talk about locomotion in VR. And then we try to understand, is locomotion good? Is that bad? Should we kill it? Does that make people feel, less comfort? Would that make people more excited? So there are a lot of discussion or even debate around that. And from the perceptual perspective, from the understanding of human being perspective, we know the so-called locomotion that's related to the so-called self-motion perception. And there are three major channels around human beings that contribute to the so-called self-motion perception. Your visual channel, your vestibular channel. For example, when you are in the elevator, we all know when it starts to move, right? And then even visually, it's stationary, but the inner ear tells us, oh, you are moving. And then the other channel is what we call more of the tactile cue. When the wind is blowing, you feel like, oh, maybe I'm moving. Right? And typically, all of those channels all go together, except if someone reading a book in the car, so focused, and then the inner ear say, you are moving like crazy, and then your eyes say, no, you are stationary. So there are some conflict there. Very similarly in VR, you can imagine, and for some of the experience, like roller coaster, and then our eyes telling you, oh, you are moving so excited, up and down. The inner ear say, maybe you are not. So the question is, when those sensory channels, if they don't disagree with each other, would that really a bad thing? And then if that is, then a lot of experience in VR will probably have this kind of situation. And from the self-motion perception perspective, when we look at each of those sensory channels, actually they have different type of sensitivity around different type of motion. In other words, for the visual channel, they tend to be more sensitive when the motion frequency at a more of the lower pace. In other words, it's a low pass filter. And then for the vestibular system, it's not so sensitive if the car is just moving a little bit. Many of you may have the experience like in a train, and then there's on the other side, there's another train, so the train starts moving with Am I moving or the other side moving? Because our vestibular system is not that sensitive to that degree. In other words, it's more like a high-pass filter. And then, so the tricky area is when both of the sensory channels are pretty sensitive at certain area, and then when one say you are moving, the other one say no, you are not moving, then yes, there is a higher likelihood that some people might experience certain things like butterfly in the stomach, things like that. So if we look at that from the product perspective, how do we better enhance the comfort level for our users? And we look into that, look into the theoretical ground, and then we start to design some of the study trying to really get to the bottom of it. And in addition to that, we can start to develop certain type of intervention, help to gauge that, help to mitigate the potential conflict from there. And for those of you who are interested in things like this, actually 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, my colleague Tom Heath, he has a section together with some of the other people that related to the discussion about locomotion and then how do we build certain things, trying to reduce that kind of conflict in Unity. 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Awesome. Yes.
Just curious, what are some typical mistakes that people that are new to UX design make typically when they're first trying to do research and discovery of their people? Yeah.
So the question was, what are some typical mistakes that new UX practitioners make when they're trying to understand people? Okay.
Trying to understand people. Do you want to start, Franz? Typical mistakes people make when they're trying to understand people. Well, I would need to think about this for a sec. Typical mistakes. Do you mean for like in doing the research or in the design? Like design mistakes or?
Studying people to understand
Yeah.
the design, the process, and the tendency you might go down a path where you're just gathering wrong data and asking wrong questions.
Oh yeah. Wrong data, wrong question. Sure. One thing I think about, so I'll mention one and then that'll give you guys a chance to think of another one, a better one. But I do think one thing that comes about a lot is so I talked about a simple method, like bring some people in, show them some stuff, ask them some questions. That sounds like really great and easy, and it kind of is. But what can happen is you'd say, oh, hey, Brian, play my game. And then he'd be like, you know what you should do is build, like, make the protagonist go swimming. That would be my favorite. I think that'd be great. And then I'm like, okay, great. We're going to do that. And you build the thing they ask for. And what should be happening in UX research is more like sort of you alluded to with understanding motivations, goals, desires, behavior, and doing more observation of the people as humans as opposed to just saying, like, tell me what you want. Because the people you bring in as participants probably aren't UX designers and they aren't developers. And so it's like, do you guys see The Simpsons when they built the Homer car? And so he was like, these are all the things I want in this car. But like what they didn't understand was what his underlying desire was in the car. And that is actually what UX research is about, is it's like, but where do we want to get you? And then we should make a decision as professionals in our design field to get you there and not just necessarily say like, oh, I want to feel like I'm floating. You should make it swim. It's like, great, we'll build the swim. It's like, no. What is it about the wanting to float? What is it about that? Like, what's the motivation, the behavior? What do I observe you doing in this moment? And how can I design better for that instead of just doing the thing people ask for? That's the first mistake I think I've seen the most common is like, everybody asks for X, so let's just do it. It's like, but why? Like, why are they? And that's why I think the context and the depth of qualitative research, which includes observation or like some sort of participatory moments where you just spend time together, can help you get to the point of like, but wait, what are you actually saying you want here, and not just like laying it down literally. It's a little more.
To add to that, another mistake is that people conduct research or without complete buy-in from their team. And so UX research is not just about us telling people what to do. It's like, hey, here's what people do this. Like, that's not what it is. To me anyways, I perceive it as it's choreographing moments where people can come together, understand the problems together, and actually do things together. So when people are surprised, they're like, wait, this is the wrong thing. That's a problem that should have been like we should have caught earlier on, as opposed to, or this is the wrong data. That should be something like, well, why is it the wrong data? Is it because not necessarily because it's the wrong people, or it could be because it was a wrong question, but that should have been agreed upon earlier. And then a lot of that is like asking the teams, like, what is our goals? What what do we want to achieve? And then align with those. And then to Tara's point, then have a more outcomes approach to research, which is rather than prescribing everything that's being told to us, we try to understand the underlying values about that. So it's not about people back in the day saying that they want faster horses, they just want to get to places faster. That's,
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
I think something along that line, to me, is I will see some of the researchers, they tend to, I will call them, try to treat the symptoms as opposed to look at the root cause of the issue. Now, if there are certain type of underlying issue there, and then it will evolve into a lot of different symptoms. And then if we just chase those symptoms, okay, and do a lot of things like a try and error, supposed to really dive deeper, looking into what's the underlying cause that result into a line of symptoms. And then we will probably get to it really busy and then never-ending problems, and then rather than sort of step backward and then see, okay, why do we see things like that? And I think that's also a common mistake. Let's see.
Yes.
How do you recruit participants for your UX research, and what demographics do you tend to?
Is it specific for Oculus or?
Specific for Oculus, yeah. Like, are there any spaces that you want to target?
So the question was, how do we recruit for our participants, specifically for Oculus, and how do we go about recruiting?
Yeah. Do you want to? I think we all do it different, right? We're in different.
I can start. So because my focus is on hardware research, I typically do a larger sample size than what would normally be feasible in most organizations, because our goal is that these headsets should feel comfortable. They should fit a wide range of sizes and shapes, and so for that, and because of that general criteria, I actually have probably the least stringent criteria. I was like, I want any and everyone, because I want to make sure that any and everyone can actually use these devices. So that's and in terms of how we actually recruit, we are very fortunate that we have a team that supports our research here at Oculus, and so we can typically send out a screener of who we are looking for, or the types of people that we're looking for, and then they would reach out either through other vendors or through an internal list and be able to source our participants that way. But Tara and James can talk more specifically about other types of criteria.
Yeah, I sort of similarly really try to ensure there's diversity in all of the people I recruit. So like trying to recruit 50% men, 50% women in order to like make sure as much diversity as possible, and then also mapping to different things, which would totally depend on what I'm studying at that moment. So if I was, let's see, for instance, a lot of times when we have been doing research on Oculus Quest, it's going to be like a great gaming device. I think we've talked about that a lot today on a giant screen, and so I would always ensure I have a few people who are gamers and a few people who aren't, just to sort of like compare that difference. Like, what does it feel like in this? And then, as I said, gender diversity, whatever we can learn. We're pretty careful about privacy and ensuring that anybody we reach out to, we sort of have permission to contact. So we think a lot about that, and so we end up kind of reaching out to populations that we're allowed to. And the recruiting team kind of does some of that magic. And I got to tell you, that's like one of my favorite parts of working at Oculus, because recruiting is challenging, and so having support in that area is like a huge weight off my shoulders.
Because there has to be mutual consent, right? So they have to be willingly saying, yes, you can reach out to me. Yes, I want to participate, and yes, you are welcome to participate.
Yes.
Yes.
To go.
So I was surprised to see an example of typing in the keynote, because we haven't figured out the Virgin's accommodation problem. So why would you type in a headset?
So the question was, why would one type in a headset?
Well, I guess that will be related to some degree related to a specific application that we are looking at, right? If we are thinking about to some degree, if we want to facilitate people being able to do some level of work in the virtual environment, and typing is probably one type of pretty generic type of task that they need to do. But but definitely, I'm totally with you that this, to me, is related to what I would consider as more of a detailed object manipulation, because all of the hand-eye coordination and everything need to be so accurate and then so delicate. And then if there are some kind of disparity there, probably people cannot really type well. Totally agree. So in other words, we have a long way to go, but we also work very hard. So trying to see what are some of the most critical variables that we should really look into, such that we can basically minimize that kind of performance degradation. So those are the areas that we as a team also looking into.
And I could add to that in that, so like James mentioned, when we think about the future of VR, right, it includes the ability to type and actually do work. And so early steps are necessary despite it having its rooms of improvements. With that said, there's actually a really good paper from Kai last year that did a very interesting study where they, in VR, people were typing and they had different variations of the fidelity of hand representation across different representations of keyboards and looking at both touch and non-touch typists. And what they found was for touch typists, because we actually typically type without even looking, their performance doesn't really shift despite the fidelity of the visual experience. Non-touch typists, it does affect them greatly. And so to the point of like, we still have this convergence issue within VR. Yes, it's still an issue, and hopefully we'll one day be able to resolve it with what Abrash's features of future visions. But for the most part, if you were to think about work and touch typists, actually the performance is not, the differences in performance is not very significant. So that's an interesting part. And if you'd like, I can share that article with you. I saw a question in the back.
Two questions, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing it correctly, how do you isolate the? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Thanks. When you are looking to isolate a particular feature that influences the overall UX experience, how do you isolate that from a more complex product?
Did you get the
Isolating
question?
features, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's because we talked about when you're trying to breaking down all the moments within the experience so that you can get to the nuance and understand like problem points and solutions, and how do we actually do that?
Right, so for testing,
Yeah.
how do you take that particular feature out of the context of its more complex and maybe interlocking parts?
Yeah, I guess.
Can you repeat it for everyone? No.
How do you take the feature out of the context of the overall holistic? Generally, yeah, that's an interesting question. I know I think we have to go. No, wait, what? I'll answer that, and then we gotta go. And then I saw some other hands, so like we'll just go over there and you can come chat with us. So I don't know, in like 30 seconds or less, however this works. This is really tactical, but I actually like create a guide that walks through all the stages of the experience I'm about to put someone through, and think about like in each moment, what's the goal? Like learning how to play, and then like being wowed, and then like meeting a character and like feeling great about that. And then there might be trails of like, need to feel good, need to feel welcome, need to understand that I can engage, or something like this. And I actually will break it into almost like tiny tasks. So at any point you could say, oh, we understand whether or not we've taught people how to play really well. And you could like separate that. But in fact, inevitably you also have a holistic picture of the whole thing. So you can't take it out of the context, because in the end they're gonna say, yeah, I understood how to play and that went great, but like overall, meh. Or like, this was amazing, and they were fumbling through the whole thing. You'd be like, we did not teach them anything, but man, they had a good time. So there's always like different elements to it, and I don't think you can remove it from the context, but you can break down into really like tactical and pinpointed steps at each moment of what you're hoping to get as you move through, so that the team can say, okay, cool, we're going to focus on the learning part, but at least we know the whole thing is really fun and engaging, so like we can let that lie, you know, something. Does that help? Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
okay.
and just a quick point to add, from the perception perspective, and then I will typically look into what kind of fundamental tasks are they doing?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
related to object manipulation in the detail, or just a basic manipulation? Does that related to the so-called spatial navigation? Does that related to visual search that they're trying to find something to, or would that related to even maintain the postural stability? So at the end of the day, to me, those are all related to the fundamental sensor channel or motor channel that engage into certain type of activity. And then there are some kind of constants underneath, and then we know the strengths and weakness of that. So I think that's a way that I tend to break down into more of the fundamental tasks as a human being, able or not able to do.
Yeah.
So I know there's a few other questions. So we'll be around that area in the back. So we'll meet you there if there's any other questions. Other than that, thank you so much for joining
Thank you
us.
very
Thanks
much.
for
We
your
hope you've
time
learned
and
something.
attention.
Thank you.
Thanks.